Hello, everyone. It's Miss Colonico, and we are here for topic 7.5, theories of development. So we've talked about different kinds of development, and we've talked about like how we measure development, but we also want to make sure that we're understanding the ways that we or theorize like how stuff develops. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started with our first EK, which is SPS 7E1. And what we want to understand is that these theories seek to explain spatial variations in development. In other words, why different places are more or less developed than others. And most of them emerged after World War II to understand why some areas of the world had lower standards of living than others and why some places had developed economically while others had not. So we want to start with the first theory, which is Rostow's stages of economic growth. And we're going to go through each one of these. There'll be a separate video so that you guys can watch them kind of in compartmentalization instead of all one big thing. Because this is one EK, but there's several different theories. So when we're looking at Rostow's stages, we want to think about what the theory is in the first place. So this was a theory that was introduced in 1960 that focused on the shift from traditional to modern forms of society and economic systems. So you can see here that we have a traditional society at the bottom and then high mass consumption up at the top. And this follows a linear progression from one stage to the other, with the idea that each society could eventually get to this highest stage of high mass consumption if they did certain things, and that every country in the world was in one of these 5 stages. So the first stage, the first stage is traditional society, as it says on the graphic. And in traditional societies, this is where economic development hasn't really started. And most economic activities are in the primary sector, especially really heavily into agriculture. And most of the wealth is going to what are considered non-productive activities like religion and military. There's very little technology and very little social mobility with limited local or regional trade. And most of that trade, if it does happen, is happening based on barter, not based on a common currency. And it's important to note that as of right now, there are no whole countries that are in this particular stage, but there may be parts of countries that are. The second stage is preconditions for takeoff, as you can see on the chart. And in this stage, an elite group introduces innovative economic activities, which leads to new technology and infrastructure that stimulates productivity. And the country starts to export raw materials and agricultural products, so they start getting engaged in international trade. And we start to see individual social and economic mobility. Modern countries in this stage might be supported with international aid. The third stage is takeoff, and this is characterized by rapid growth in a limited number of economic activities and industries which achieve technical advances and become productive. Other parts of the economy remain stuck in traditional practices, however, and there is some industrialization. You see the start of urbanization and the beginning of self-sustaining economic growth, which then leads to the fourth stage, which is drive to maturity, in which modern technology diffuses to a wide variety of industries, which then grow rapidly. Workers become more skilled and specialized. Social infrastructure like schools and hospitals grow, and economic growth as a whole is greater than population growth. And that leads us to the very last stage in Rostow's stages, and that would be high mass consumption, in which the economy shifts from heavy industry to consumer goods, and people spend most of their money on consumer goods, and higher order things become more common. So you want to think back to central place. People buy more higher order goods once they hit high mass consumption. And there's a strong tertiary sector that develops. And socially, we see those countries pushing for more egalitarianism. Now, there are problems with Rostow's stages. First of all, it's based on Europe and North America, so it often doesn't fit with non-Western cultures and non-capitalist economies. The model also encourages the exploitation of less developed countries, which would then trap them in a position of being exploited long-term and unable to develop further, while keeping the more highly developed countries in positions of power. And keep in mind that they got there by exploiting other countries. And so his idea that you can eventually get to high mass consumption wouldn't really be true, because exploitation is necessary in order to get to high mass consumption, and eventually going to run out of people to exploit, essentially. And the countries that are being exploited need international assistance in order to develop. It also suggests unidirectional growth towards progress, but countries can regress, and countries are interdependent with one another, meaning that they don't exist within a vacuum. So the things that are happening with one country affects other countries as well. This model also says that all countries can develop to the highest level, but significant differences between countries in a lot of different ways, whether that's social differences, cultural differences, economic differences, whether or not you have resources, stuff like that, all makes it very difficult for countries to develop in the same way. And not all countries have the access to the same resources and opportunities as others. So this may not really actually work. And it doesn't consider sustainability or carrying capacity. And so what that means is that not all countries can actually achieve that highest level of development without significant environmental harm, because their country might not be set up in such a way that allows for that kind of development without significant problems. And keep in mind that even the ones that do have the resources are experiencing significant problems as well. But the ones that don't have those resources to begin with, it's going to be worse. All right, so that takes us to the next theory, which is Wallerstein. We've talked about him before, so I'll be back with you shortly to pick up on Wallerstein.